Have you noticed that recent pickups are essentially the adult version of show and tell? Except instead of bringing your classmates a cool rock or your favorite dinosaur, you're showing strangers on the internet your favorite pullover? At least that's what I'm doing today. Hi everyone, if you're new here, my name is Saul. I'm a grad student by day and apparently an aspiring YouTuber by night. Today, we're talking about my very first piece from Story MFG. Now, as a quick disclaimer, if you came to this video simply to find out what I picked up, well, it was probably in the thumbnail. The truth is that the garment itself is only half the reason I make these videos. In my videos, to be clear, I'm not trying to convince you to buy anything, let alone any one particular piece. I'm not a sales associate and I'm certainly not a brand ambassador. What interests me is something else. I like to do a deep dive into why this particular brand, why this garment, and why now. Because if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know that I'm convinced clothes are about more than merely clothes. They're about natural materials and craftsmanship. They're about memory. They're about the lives we end up living with them. And today's brand feels especially fitting because stories are right there in the name, Story MFG. And hopefully they're at the heart of this channel too. By the way, MFG stands for manufacturing, though recently I heard one of the founders say that it can stand for whatever the consumer wants it to. So now I'm curious. Leave me a comment. If Story MFG stood for something in your life, what would it be? I'd only heard of Story MFG in passing until a few weeks ago. Then, for reasons I can no longer remember, I went down the rabbit hole, as one does. You know how it goes. One Instagram caption becomes a podcast. The podcast becomes their website becomes the manifesto. The manifesto becomes listening to more interviews with the founders. Before I knew it, I wasn't asking myself whether I liked the clothes anymore. I was asking myself a different question. Can clothes embody values? Now, I don't mean that in the sense that buying a particular brand suddenly makes someone virtuous. If only it were that easy. What I mean is this. Can a garment carry within it a philosophy of how it ought to have been made? Can the choices behind it, the materials, the dyes, the people who made it, matter just as much as how it looks? I think it's safe to say that Story MFG would say that the answer is yes. Their manifesto isn't tucked away somewhere as an afterthought. It's front and center, and it's ambitious, maybe even idealistic. They talk about regenerative agriculture, they talk about supporting artisans, about reducing waste, about using natural dyes, about building garments meant to last, and perhaps most strikingly, they make everything vegan. That last point gave me pause, not because I disagree with it, but because I myself am not vegan. I own wool, I own leather, I own silk, and yet I found myself wanting to support what they are trying to do. That got me thinking, maybe ethics isn't something we either have or don't have. Maybe it's more of a continuum. Buying a single Story MFG garment doesn't make me vegan any more than consuming raw denim makes me Japanese. But it does mean that for this purchase at least, I'm choosing to support a company whose values push a little further than my own. And I actually think that's kind of beautiful. Not because we have to agree on everything, but because we don't. I think we're often told that supporting a person or a company means endorsing every single belief they hold. And I'm not sure that's true. Sometimes it simply means saying, I may not be where you're at this time, but I admire the direction you're trying to move. And I realized that was true for me with Story MFG. But even then, there was still one question left. Why this particular piece? The short answer is that the piece I selected checked an embarrassingly high number of boxes for me. Let's start with what it isn't. it isn't one of their jackets. To be sure, I still have my eye on one of their RTS ISO, probably mispronouncing that, jackets. Unfortunately, by the time I found them, every colorway that I was interested in was sold out in my size. Hopefully though, one day I'll get my hands on one. It also wasn't the shorts. I came very close. There was this beautiful pair in orange that I genuinely considered as recently as this morning. But I'd recently picked up a pair of Evan Kenori shorts, which I'm actually wearing right now, that I've reviewed here on the channel if you'd like to watch that afterward. And I wasn't quite ready to venture out that far my comfort zone color-wise. Instead, I landed here, the Polite Pullover. And honestly, I think it found me at exactly the right time. Story MFG describes it as being inspired by vintage hiking pullovers. It's oversized, naturally dyed by hand, made from organic cotton corduroy, has a drawstring waist, side pockets, and these beautiful crocheted chest patches. There's even a small hand-embroidered peace sign. But what interested me wasn't only the specifications, which are great, it was the feeling that the piece evoked. The moment I saw it, I could already picture myself wearing it. Not necessarily to a dinner, not to a fancy event. Instead, walking Teddy on a chilly morning, grabbing coffee with my wife, running errands. The sort of garment that quietly becomes part of your weekly routine. I think that's always a good sign. I've loved corduroy for a very long time. Long before it came into fashion or became fashionable again. I still remember being in the 7th grade. At the time, we wore uniforms, or
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Please excuse Siri. I still remember being in 7th grade. At the time, we wore uniforms, or at least a uniform color palette. Black, white, gray, navy, brown. My own little uniform became polo shirts and corduroy trousers. And one day, even one of the lunch ladies complimented my outfit, which looking back might have been the pinnacle of my middle school fashion career. Apparently, I've never really left either the color palette or the corduroy behind. So when I realized that this piece was made from Indigo Corduroy, I was pretty much sold. Speaking of indigo, that was another realization that I had. Most days, as I've mentioned in other videos, I'm wearing raw denim. Indigo is probably the color that I therefore wear the most, and yet somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself that blue didn't suit me up top. I honestly have no idea where that came from. I think I borrowed it from another YouTuber from a video from a few years ago, and I just came to accept it as fact. Then I looked inside my own wardrobe. A lot of my trousers are brown, olive, or khaki. Pair those with another earth tone shirt, and suddenly I'm dressed like I work for UPS. No shade to UPS. But a little variety, I think, never hurt anybody. And then there's something I haven't really talked about on this channel before. Story MFG has this quiet countercultural spirit running through it. The peace signs, the craft, the handwork, the natural dyes. And don't let the short hair fool you. In high school and most of college, I had long hair. Looking back, I probably fit the campus aesthetic better than I realized at the time. There's something about Story MFG that reminds me of that version of myself. Not because I want to dress like a hippie, but because there was an openness to that version of me that I think I've slowly edited out over the years. That realization surprised me because somewhere along the way I became pretty good at curating an aesthetic, less good at expressing myself, and those two things aren't the same. I love clothes, I like thinking about them. I mean, for crying out loud, I make videos about them. And yet, outside of my wife, virtually nobody in my day-to-day life knows that this channel even exists. which is admittedly not the most efficient strategy for finding community. Part of why I started making these videos was because I wanted to find people who care about this niche as much as I do. Not just consume the community, but to contribute to it. Because if I'm honest, it's a little lonely not knowing many people in real life who get excited about hand-dyed corduroy or Japanese denim or the construction of a sweatshirt. At the same time, I've never wanted to be the loudest dresser in the room. I've never wanted to be the center of attention. So I found myself trying to thread this needle, expressing myself without feeling like I'm performing. And I think that's why this garment resonated with me. It isn't asking me to become anyone new. If anything, it's asking me to remember someone. It's asking me to remember that version of myself with long hair, the one who wasn't quite so concerned with fitting neatly into an aesthetic, the one who probably would have loved Story MFG before he even knew what Story MFG was. Maybe somebody will notice the embroidery, maybe someone will ask where it's from. Maybe they'll think it's vintage. As I've mentioned before, vintage has never really been my lane, but if this garment starts a conversation, if it helps me find one person who's interested in clothes for the same reasons I am, then maybe that's enough. Because perhaps that's how community begins. Not because we all dress the same, but because somebody recognizes that another person cares about craft, about clothing, about stories, and suddenly you have something to talk about. That brings me to one question that I've started asking whenever I buy something that feels significant. Not does it spark joy, no shade to Marie Kondo. Mine is a little different. What is this garment asking of me? I don't think every piece asks the same thing. My New Balance sneakers asked me to wear them. My Jacques Marie Mage glasses asked me not to keep them precious. The Stofa hoodie asked me to slow down. This piece asks something different of me. It's asking me to loosen my grip on the version of myself that I've been carefully curating. Because somewhere along the way, I think I started confusing minimalism with invisibility. I wanted everything to work together, nothing to clash, nothing to call attention to itself, which sounds nice until you realize that you've become quite good at disappearing. This piece doesn't scream, it doesn't demand attention, but it does have something to say. And maybe so do I. It also made me think about something I've heard debated for years, but especially pretty recently. Is fashion art? Personally, I'm not sure that's quite the right question. Some fashion is, some isn't. Just like some furniture is, some architecture is, some writing is. This piece to me absolutely feels like art. You can see it in the embroidery, you can smell it in the natural dyes, you can feel it in the fabric. There are traces of human hands everywhere, but unlike the painting hanging on a gallery wall, I don't think this piece wants to be admired from a distance. It wants to be worn, it wants wrinkles, coffee stains, dog hair, faded indigo. It wants to become part of someone's life, because I actually think wearing it is how I'll complete it. The makers made the garment, the wearer, in this case, I, will make its story. Maybe that's why Story MFG resonated with me so much. Not because buying one pullover suddenly makes me a more ethical person. It doesn't. But because it reminded me that clothes can embody values. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. Sometimes the values belong to the people who made them. Sometimes they belong to the people wearing them, and sometimes, if you're lucky, they become shared. So what would success look like for this piece 1 year from now? Honestly, I hope I just remember the mornings that I wore it to walk Teddy, the conversations it started, the places it came with me, the ordinary Tuesdays. I hope it stops feeling like the Story MFG pullover and starts feeling like mine. If you've made it this far, thank you. I'd love to know where you stand. Do you think that clothes can embody values? Do you think fashion can be art? Or is it something entirely different? Let me know down below. And if you've never commented before, consider this your invitation. I'm hoping these videos become less of a monologue and more of a conversation. As always, please don't forget to dislike and unsubscribe. But seriously, thank you for being here. Nos vemos.